Okay, thank you. My name's Peter Smith. I was born in 1950 and grew up on Markham Road, 4551. I know it's Markham Street now, but it will always be Markham Road to me. I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital, but my parents lived on Markham Road. I want to take this opportunity to thank Barb for the opportunity and to thank Enid for encouraging me to join. Thank you, Enid. A little prehistory first. My dad was born in a little town outside of Birmingham, England, and he emigrated to Saskatchewan in 1926. He eventually made his way west. Right in the middle of the Depression, he ended up being a lumberjack. Got as far as Vancouver, and I guess he couldn't get any further than Victoria. My mother was born in Aberfan, Wales, and her and her first husband moved to London. They had 2 kids before the Battle of Britain, in which her husband was killed in the bombing while she was pregnant with 2 of my brothers. They were twins. So they, after the war, my mom flitted around the countryside, mostly South England, South Wales, hooked up with her sister and family, and they ran board and breakfast and lodging houses, that sort of thing. But at one point they got tired of rationing, I guess, which, they were serving whale steaks at one of the boarding lodges. So they decided to emigrate. And my mother had a brother, Eddie Powell, who had emigrated years earlier and settled down in Alberta. So my mom, my aunt, my uncle, 4 kids by then, spent a winter in Lacombe, Alberta in 1948, and decided that was the only and last winter they wanted to spend in Alberta. So one of my uncles and my aunt, or I think 2 of my uncles maybe, came out to Victoria and thought, hey, this place is great. It's not going to be as cold as Alberta in the winter. So then the rest of my family joined, and in 1949, I guess, they arrived in Victoria. So there was my mom, Phyllis, she was Phyllis Searle at the time, my aunt Eunice and Bert Green, and my uncle and aunt Eddie and Lily Powell, who lived next door to Enid. There was also my uncle Reg. They were all my mother's siblings. So they settled down there. I don't, of course, remember anything about the first couple or 3 years there. But, thanks to Enid and some others, a bit of that's been filled in. So I gather they became integral parts of the neighborhood. And, I've heard stories of going over to the Christesons on Scarborough Road to listen to Mr. Christeson's, had a ham radio, so they spent a little time doing that. My aunt was heavily involved, she lived on the corner of Pipeline and West Saanich, became friends with the Flanjacks and all of the neighbors around, Mrs. Hobbs and assorted folks. My mom worked at the Memorial Pavilion, I think, up at Royal Oak, the little hospital there. So when I was about 2, they separated, and my mom went back to England. I went with her. 3 of my siblings went. My eldest brother, Tony, stayed in Canada and joined the Navy. So I guess it was a year and a half, 2 years. I was in Bristol, Somerset, Banwell, southern England. They came back. We all came back to Canada and came back to Royal Oak, and of course I'm glad we did. After returning, I guess I started to learn a little bit about the house that I lived in, which was the original Quick house. So I've been doing a little bit of research on the Quick family, and I would just advise anybody that if you're going to do research at Saanich Archives, don't trust everything they have, because it's not all accurate. So the house that I grew up in on 4551 Markham Road, as far as I can tell, it is the original Quick house. So the Quick family, there was Christopher and Rebecca were the mother and father at the time. They had moved from, well, Christopher had moved from Ireland to Australia. And I'm going to talk a bit about two Fred Quicks, and people get them confused. And you can find this at the archives where they've got them confused. So I'll call them Fred Quick Sr. and Fred Quick Jr., even though they're not father and son, they're uncle and nephew. The family, Fred Quick Sr. was born in Australia, but then the Quick family moved to New Zealand, and that's where William, or Will Quick, was born. They emigrated to California, I think, first, and then came up to Victoria. And I know from reading the past newspapers and so on that they were in Victoria by at least the 1890s. They had a prize Jersey dairy farm, the two Quick brothers, Fred and Will. But for the first years, they were living in Cadbur Bay. But they owned property in Royal Oak at the time, because I was doing research on another subject and came across a police incident where the police were fining Fred Quick, and this was 1897, for thistles, Scotch thistles on the road allowance going up Markham Road. Which is interesting, because when I was doing the research, his father had the same kind of fine, but for California thistles in New Zealand he was fined for, which was kind of interesting. So they built this house which is on Markham Road now, but Markham Road didn't exist at the time, so the address was West Saanich. So it was a long road allowance with, as far as I've been able to tell, just the one house, which was the first Quick house, which would have been built probably about 1904. Now, my parents always told me that it was way older than that, but I kind of think 1904 seems about right, because that's when the Quicks started showing up in newspapers with their dairy cows in Royal Oak instead of Cadbur Bay. So Fred Quick Sr., well, both of the Quick brothers were sort of instrumental in the whole area of Royal Oak in terms of creating the municipality of Saanich, which didn't exist. When they first arrived, Saanich was part of Victoria. Fred Quick Sr. was the second reeve or mayor of Saanich, which, of course, he and his family had helped to create. And I think he was reeve of Saanich for 2 or 3 years, and then he was an alderman for several more years. So in the meantime, I'm looking at this house and growing up in it, thinking of the Quicks and all of that background. And one interesting incident from that time was my mother was doing gardening outside and found one of the Quicks' wedding rings. Now, I don't know which one, and who she gave it to, because Mrs. Quick, that lived there, that was Fred Sr.'s wife, died in 1945. And I think his mother, excuse me, Rebecca Quick, died in 1918 at that house. So eventually, I guess 1927, Fred Quick Sr. died, and his widow, I guess, lived there for a bit longer, and then Saanich decided to put Markham Road through. So they asked Fred Quick Sr.'s wife, what they should call the road, and she named it No Road, like Knowe, thank you. Which means, she was Scottish, so No is a small hill. And they lived on the small hill on No Road. So looking at the 1931 census, I see that No Road existed for at least 4 or 5 years, because in 1931 there were, I think, 4 families living on No Road. I guess that was too confusing, so it got changed to Markham Road. I have no idea why it became Markham Road. But for me, it was a great place to grow up, because we had all these magnificent mature fruit trees. So there were 6 or 7 plum trees, pear trees, apple trees, probably all planted by Fred Quick, years and years ago. And a cherry tree, Queen Anne cherry tree, which I remember as a kid sitting up and just, eating cherries till I puked, pretty much. Me and the birds. So, and of course, the property was, I don't know. My parents always told me it was 10 acres, but I know at one point I read something about Brian Houle, who lived there in the late 1920s, was saying it was 7 acres, and of course he wanted to get out of there and up to Prospect Lake because the land flooded. So anyhow, we had between 7 and 10 acres that stretched across Colquitt's Creek to the other side. So it was a great place to grow up in, and lots of land to goof around in. We had, as well as the fruit trees and the sort of hobby farm, pigs, goats, cows, sheep, chickens. And at the time, I spent a lot of time with my best friend at the time was probably John Whitney, who lived in one of the houses across the street. So we used to go down and play in Colquitt's Creek, in the summer when it was easy to do, and the creek was a little lower. So we had great fun down there, mostly playing battles. It was sort of the hangover from the Second World War, I guess. So I had a metal ship, and we'd goof off down there. But there was a lovely spot on the other side of the creek where I used to go with my mom for picnics. She'd take us down there for picnics. Sadly, I went back there this last summer, fought my way through the canary grass, and boy, what a mess. Anyhow, it was nice at the time. I guess the cows and Quick's cattle kept all the undergrowth down, so it was really nice at the time. Most of my friends at the time, were neighborhood kids like John Whitney, and I remember there was a neighborhood gang that I was part of, I was probably the youngest kid there, but we hung out in the field. Well, there were fields at the time between Markham and Scarborough Road. So I hang out there with, I remember Robin and Billy Wheeler and the Edwards boys, and maybe Gene Turner, I'm not sure.
Oh my God.
I remember, I don't know why they accepted me into the group, because I was a fair bit younger than the rest, but I think it had something to do with the cigarettes. My dad had bought cartons of Daily Mail cigarettes, so every once in a while when I go down to meet with a gang of boys, I'd swipe a pack of cigarettes and take it down to share with them. Sorry, Dad. So that was a lot of fun. I remember at that time there was hunting on Quick's Pond, as I knew it, which was, it stopped in 1956, but my mom was, you know, a great animal lover, so we had a Chesapeake Bay Retriever. So, you know, I remember, like, hunting season, our dog would go down and gather up wounded ducks and bring them up, and my mom had, you know, all these cages where she was nursing all these animals back to health. It was a relief when they stopped the hunting on the pond because, I mean, the gunshots and, you know, it's kind of dangerous. So I started school, grade 1, at Royal Oak Elementary. I don't really remember my first day of school. Well, I remember part of it, but thanks to my friend Virginia McDonald, who was one of the neighbors on Markham Road, she remembered my mom taking her and myself to grade 1 at Royal Oak. All I remember is getting out of school early, there being nobody there to meet me, and running, crying down West Saanich Hill until there was my mom on her way, which was good. School was, well, I'm sure some of you will remember the schools, but I had a lot of fun. I had, my favorite teacher was Mrs. Reed, who I had in grade 3 and grade 6, so double the duty. My first grade 1 teacher was Miss Henderson. Had lots of friends there. I made friends with, the principal at the time was Mr. Darks, so I made friends with his son, Jimmy Darks. So, you know, I got in good with the principal, which was kind of a good deal. Even though, you know, I'd go out there and play out in Pat Bay where they lived. I guess incidents at school, like going to Royal Oak Elementary, I mean, it was, I'd ride my bike, of course, up West Saanich Hill, and I remember all the pranks that we used to play. One I particularly remembered and really liked. It was a highlight. One of my friends, Steve Parks, was quite a trickster, and in grade 5, I had Mr. Gardner, and he had this habit of, you know, those old green metal waste baskets. He had the habit of coming into the classroom every day, and first thing he did was stomp down the papers in the wastebasket. So he came in one day, it was full of water with just the paper floating on top. Boy, did he get a surprise. So those were great days. Eventually, for some strange reason, I turned into a teenager, at which time all my interests kind of turned to cars. So I remember I got a 1939 Plymouth sedan for my 13th birthday. And I couldn't drive it anywhere, of course, so I took it down to that field between West Saanich and Scarborough, and, you know, me and the Edwards boys and that gang, we just drove the heck out of that thing. And then I sold it to, well, sold it. I gave it to a friend of mine for a pair of soccer boots, and it ended up being driven into the ground in, I don't know if anybody knows, the Cadells on what is now Greenlee Road, driven into the ground on the field on Greenlee Road. But anyhow, I wish I had that car now, but at the time, it was, you know, it was a sedan, it was too square, so I kind of bought a 1937 Dodge Coupe, and that was way cooler because it had Cadillac, 59 Cadillac taillights Frenched into the back fenders, and, you know, so I still couldn't drive though, because, you know, I was 14, 15. So I take it down to our field, which we leased to the Quicks. So the Quicks grew corn there, but, you know, it was our field. So I went down there and, you know, drove the 37 Dodge around that field. When I finally did get my license, I inherited my mom's 1964 Hillman Husky, I think, which was it was an English car. What can I say? It did me well, but then I bought my dream car, which was a 1959, excuse me, 1959 MGA drop-head coupe, dual cams, I wish I had that one too, still. So that was a ton of fun, and it was good with girls for some reason. Which actually I should backtrack to a story in grade 6, which was probably my favorite year, and that's again, I had Mrs. Reed for a teacher. But it was the only year that I remember Patty Johnson being in my class, and she lived on Wilkinson Road, just up from the Cuthberts. I don't know where she came from or what became of her, although I did talk to her many, many, many years later. But anyhow, Patty was the first girl I kissed that I can remember. And Patty was pretty tall, and I was not so much. So I remember that in order to give her that first kiss, I had to stand on the kitchen stool to give her that kiss. It was worth it. She was, yeah. So with the cars, I got very enthusiastic about, we could hear Western Speedway every Saturday night. You could hear the roar of the cars. So, when I got my license, that's where I took my first dates, was to Western Speedway, so we could watch, it was Dick Varley and names always escape me, but all of the pioneers at the racetrack out there. When I turned 18, this was the age of flower power and, hippiedom and all that kind of stuff. I dropped out of high school, and me and two buddies moved into a cabin in Cordova Bay, which at the time was the horrendous rent of $35 a month for the three of us. But then I had a friend, Ian McKay, who lived on Scarborough Road, who got a job up in the Kootenays. So I went up to visit him one year, and I just fell in love with the place. This was New Denver and Silverton in West Kootenay. And eventually, Ian, Dave Searle, and another friend of ours, Dennis Hall, who I think his father was on one of these, and a girl, Judy Nevitt from Silverton. We bought 50 acres up there, an old mining claim. So I spent the next 3 years building a cabin on 10 or 15 acres of forested land. Almost had my cabin. I went to university simultaneously, so I was back and forth between England and West Kootenay and Victoria. But then I almost finished the cabin and came down to Victoria for the winter of 1978. I was basically looking for a wife because I wanted to find somebody to move up there and live in my cabin with me. I was successful. I found a wife, but she didn't want to move to West Kootenay. Yeah, so instead we moved into a house at 4630 West Saanich, which is where Lily Pete used to live, who was a great friend of my mom and my aunt. And, I remember growing up, I knew the area pretty well because, I was friends with Norman Lee, and we used to catch crayfish under the bridge at Colquitt's Creek. Had a great time. My dad used to pick up Mrs. Pete every Sunday and bring her to this church here to drop her and my mom off. My mom was in the church, loved being I think she just wanted to be in the choir because she loved singing. So The marriage didn't last, but life goes on, and I spent the next 35 years down on West Saanich Road, raised two daughters, and had a great time. And in the meantime, Quicks Pond was turned into a park, so pretty much every day I could go for a walk through our old property along the trails. And living in Saanich was great. I tried to participate as much as possible in the community, so I spent 5 years on Saanich Historic Advisory Committee, and then participated in the Glendale Lands Planning Committee to, transfer some of that land to parkland and enhance the gardens there. It was a great time, and then since then I've been sort of researching and found out that the house across the street from me, when I lived on West Saanich, was basically where Saanich began. It was the site of Colquitt's Farm, which was one of the early Hudson's Bay Company farms. So, Colquitt's Creek used to flow a lot faster sorry, it's a river now. I'm not sure when it became a river, but when I was growing up, it was a creek. It flowed a lot faster before they dammed Beaver Lake, and there was a guy named Piers, Hudson's Bay employee, set up a sawmill on Colquitt's Creek, or Colquitt's River, just opposite where I lived at 4630 West Saanich. And that house has been, played a major part in my childhood too, because when W.A.C. Bennett became premier, he had one of his, I think it was an agriculture minister, was a guy named Kiernans. And I remember going to play with the Kiernans kids. They didn't go to our school. I don't know who arranged it or whatever, but we'd play in the waterfalls, where the old sawmill was, which was great fun. Then that property passed through a number of hands, and at one time, the artist Tony Onley was living there, and of course we used to hang out with his daughter, Lynn Onley, and of course I didn't know anything about art or, what her dad did, or, that's kind of weird to be an artist. But I remember we used to go over there and have fun, and I remember one day her panicking and saying, my dad's coming home. So I remember climbing out of a second-story window and shimmying down a tree to make my way out of there. But, living there was great. I got to spend, both my daughters grew up, within a stone's throw of where I grew up, which was, a real privilege at the time. And I got to go back to Loritz baseball. And, when I was 8 or 9, my two passions in life, I guess, were baseball at one end of Markham Street and Boy Scouts at the other end of Markham Street. And I got to coach both my daughters at Loritz baseball, which was really thrilling for me because that's, of course, where I played as a kid. So it was a great time. And it was a great time at West Saanich, I used to do odd jobs for Mrs. Pete and spend a fair bit of time around there, before I actually lived there. My friend Norman, his parents had a chinchilla ranch, which was at one time apparently a real, it's one of those things you read on the back of magazines, earn a fortune, raise chinchillas. I'm pretty sure they didn't earn a fortune raising chinchillas at all. But Norman took me on a tour of the chinchillas, and I didn't know this about chinchillas at the time, but one of their defense mechanisms is the males will stand up and pee on you. Now I learned that lesson at the time. So in 2015, I did a lot of jobs working for the government of BC. I worked for the Ministry of Transportation and Highways, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, you know, this, that, and the other thing. Worked at BC Archives with Catherine Bridge, who's been here as well. And then I got a job in information and privacy and ended up being a director of privacy for the government. But I retired in 2012 and then did a little bit of work for BC Ferries and did a fair bit of contracting until about a year or two ago. But at the time, I thought, I don't need to live in Royal Oak anymore. I mean, my parents had both passed away. I mean, my kids were grown up. My daughter had gone to Calgary, one had gone to Halifax. So I bought a place in Ladysmith. And wouldn't you know it, a month after I got bought the house in Ladysmith, I got a job working for Saanich. Because, you know, idle hands, you know, that sort of thing. So 3 days a week, it wasn't a full-time job, it was 3 days a week, but 3 days a week I'm driving from Ladysmith to Saanich again, so that was kind of bizarre. It was nice working for Saanich though. I mean, it was great. I got to visit, spend a lot of time down here, walk through all the parks, all that sort of thing. But Ladysmith is pretty beautiful too, and house prices are a lot cheaper. I think that's about it, but I did want to say a couple of words about historical associations. And I know in the last meeting, Barb was talking a little bit about the challenges it is in terms of retaining membership, getting new members, and keeping societies like this going. And I just can't emphasize how important local history groups are. I mean, you are the living history of the community. And I would encourage anybody to, you know, either watching this on TV or in the audience to participate, volunteer where you can. I mean, your memories are invaluable. I had the great benefit of working with a number of historical associations in West Kootenay when I was doing some research projects there. And I couldn't have done the work that I did without them. I mean, I still belong to one of them. And, you know, thanks to Zoom and things, I can still participate. So anyhow, I would encourage anybody to participate if they can. That's it. Questions?
You named off all kinds of boys that grew up in the neighborhood, the Christensens, the McKays, and down
Yep.
the hill. And did you never associate with my brother? Was he too snotty for you?
No, he was not. He was a bit older though,
Okay.
and he wasn't one of the bad kids. I usually hung out with the bad kids.
That answers that.
When you were talking about Norman with the chinchilla farm, was that none?
Nuns was on the other side of where I lived at 40, where Mrs. Pete lived. There was the nuns that had the property where Colquitt's Creek goes through. Yes, they had chinchillas. But that's probably where Norman's parents got the idea.
What was Norman's last name?
Lee. Norman Lee.
Well, I'd like to thank you personally for bringing back a lot of memories because I knew all your aunts and uncles and they were all great friends. In those days, there weren't that many people in our area, so everybody knew everybody. And as I told you before, I remember when you were born very good. The whole neighborhood was yay. It's nice to meet you later on.
It's been a privilege to know you, Enid. I know I've watched all the videos, well, most of them, I think. And I know my sister Penny, of course, was really enthusiastic about this group. And, you know, I'm glad to sort of step on her legacy a little bit.
I had another question. Of course, I've forgotten it. Someone else must have a question. How did it get called Markham Road? You said you don't know.
I don't know. And while I have you, I don't know why Scarborough Road is named I was always told by my neighbors, Dave and Ian, that it was after Captain Scarborough. But I can find no evidence of what Captain Scarborough or who Captain Scarborough was.
I was just looking at a paper I found on my messy desk, and my dad had written a history of our property from Jeffrey Castle, who was
Yeah.
he wrote a lot of historical stuff about the city. And it's, the name Scarborough was there, was one of the people that lived there. And I found in the, digging in the dirt, why I don't know, a little jackknife that said, that had a little plaque on it, said Captain Scarborough. No, I
Amazing.
almost can't believe that, but here I am.
Yeah, no, that is amazing.
Can you find out more?
I've tried.
Okay.
You know, I do have, you know, I mean, I've talked to, of course, who would have been your neighbors, you know, Dave and Ian and the Christensons. And yeah, they all have the story, but I haven't been able to find any documentation about it.
I know what I was thinking of. Mr. Christensen had a ham radio.
Yes,
When would that have been?
that would have been early 50s, like,
I didn't know
because
that.
he had, from what I've been able to tell, he had polio, you probably know, but that was in the early 50s. So it wasn't till, you know, 52, 53, something like that. But yes, so it would have been 1950-ish.
There was a family on the corner of Old West and West Saanich in that corner lot. That Argyle was their name. And I was invited to a birthday party there for their daughter Janice, and we were trying to watch something on TV, I guess a special or something, Disney, whatever. But her dad also had a ham radio, and we had no reception, and he was not giving up. So we just settled.
Yeah, I have no idea what, you know, what kind of reception you might have had, because I never saw it.
No. Well, and my dad was a ham radio crazy guy, and the tower is still beside our house, and my husband's now using it a bit. He took the course.
Yeah, I mean, I heard these stories, but you know, that's all they were to me, were stories.
Yeah.
Because well, Enid remembers more about it than I do. I mean, she remembers when I was born,
Yeah.
which I don't remember.
No?
No.
Okay, given your early interest in automobiles, I'm interested in your shirt, which references Sandon, BC.
Yes.
Which I understand is now the home to an aging fleet of Brill buses.
It is indeed. Friend of mine, Hal Wright, bought all, well, you might call him Mr. Sandon. Sandon, for those who don't know, is a ghost town in West Kootenay, which was sort of the hub of a big silver mining rush in the 1890s. So Hal, and I actually worked with Hal's brother for many years at both at BC Archives and the government of BC. Hal became Mr. Sandon when he moved from Salt Spring Island up to Sandon and wanted to restore the city back to its old glory. But somewhere along the line, he's a real enthusiastic about technology. He runs probably the oldest operating hydroelectric plant in BC, in Sandon, and obviously was enthusiastic about Brill buses. And there they are.
I want to ask a question, Paul. There are so many people here that grew up in this area here, and Morse used to work for Fred Quick, with the cows and that. And he always told us that there was troughs down at the bottom of the Wilkinson Road, or not, West Saanich Road there, where the creek goes through, for the horses to drink up.
Yeah, I remember
Yes,
that.
yes, it was opposite our place at 4630.
Yeah.
It was the old, yeah, we used to pass by it every day going to school. It was, my understanding, it was for horses going, yeah, up and down West Saanich Hill. Of course, when I was growing up, I mean, there was West Saanich Hill and there was Church Hill, and we were kind of, Colquitt's Valley was right in the middle of it. So our, yeah, there was that old horse trough, and
It's never been mentioned.
it's fascinating, and actually, my friend Dave, he's really interested in it too, and so I did a search on it, and it still exists. It's at Point Ellis House. Yeah. But every time I've tried to go to Point Ellis House, it's been closed, so I can't actually see it.
I remember the horse trough down there, it was kept, it was always overflowed because it was fed by the pipe that went upstream of farm up and it flowed constantly into the end of the pipe, which kept that trough full of water.
Interesting, yeah, you see, it wasn't full of water when I remember it. It was empty, and so we all wondered, of course, there's no horses going up and down the hill there, but that would have been a perfect place for it, because that's where the Colquitt's Falls were, so the water would be coming down.
The other comment was, one of your favorite cars was a 59 Pontiac.
No, 1939 Plymouth.
I thought it said 59, sir, because I have a 1959 Pontiac, which I bought in 1959.
Nice.
And it's still at home, it's still there. It was used as our farm truck for years.
Well, at the time, 1959 Pontiac would have been far too new for me. Yeah, I wanted those old ones.
Usually a two-door hardtop.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, anybody else, any questions? Hearing none, I'd just like to thank you, Peter, for coming and giving our talk today, which was very, very interesting.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And if anybody look, there's a few pictures I put up there on a board. So tried to find pictures of Quicks Pond when, I was, of course, I mean, I think everybody knows about Quicks Pond and skating on Quicks Pond. That's what we did all the time. And turns out that Fred Quick Jr. and my parents had the same problem with people, pulling up fence posts, and they tore down our chicken coop one year to have bonfires down by the pond. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.